We are learning dribs and drabs about what the president might address on the economy, for example, talk of a tax on billionaires as well as a Wall Street tax, quadrupling the proposed amount to 1% on stock buybacks for corporations. Senator John Thune, the South Dakota senator, at that, the Senate minority with us on that and what he thinks Republicans and those in the audience and how they might respond to that. Senator, these taxes I just alluded to, what do you think?
Well, I think it'd be very, fitting for a Democrat president, particularly Joe Biden, to make the centerpiece of his economic agenda raising taxes, because that's what Democrats do when they're in power, Neil. What we ought to be talking about instead is how are we going to grow the economy, how are we going to create jobs, how are we going to tackle inflation, how are we going to make America energy independent again, and what are we going to do to reduce spending? And we don't have a revenue problem in this country. Revenues are up. In fact, they're up at historic levels. What we have is a spending problem. And that's exactly what the focus of his remarks ought to be about. But I'm sure, as is the case with Democrats, when they're in power, what they do is they grow and expand government. And to do that, you got to raise taxes. So they'll say it's going to be taxes on the rich, but as we all know from past experience, what may start out as a tax on the rich ultimately creeps down into the middle class. And that's the exactly wrong prescription, I think, for the future of this country if you're serious about creating jobs and growing our economy.
Well, they come right back at you, not you specifically, Senator, and say Republicans are rich ones to talk about watching the spending. $8.2 trillion added to the debt under President Trump. Now, a good chunk of that, quite rightly, was for COVID and emergency relief. I understand that. But they come back and say, who are you to judge us?
Well, what I can tell you, Neil, I know a lot of that was COVID, but now we've got to get our house in order. We've got $31 trillion in debt. You know, there used to be a time when your debt got up in the 75% of GDP range, you started worrying. Now we're well north of 100% of GDP. And this is a spending problem. And coming out of COVID, there was so much money flushed out there into the economy, which contributed largely. That's one of the big reasons for inflation. And then the reconciliation bills the Democrats passed in the last couple of years. But honestly, we have got to get spending reined in and under control. And the president can work with us to do that, or he can take the easy way out, which is to talk about, again, taxing the rich. Republicans, in the time I've been here, almost every budget battle I've been a part of, Democrats want to spend more, Republicans want to spend less, with one exception, and that's defense. They're always willing to cut defense, and they proved that again this last year. But if you're serious about taking care of the national security interests of this country, about getting our economy back on its feet, about making America energy independent and controlling our southern border, there's a lot of work to do. And these are all, in my view, failures of this administration. I'm sure he's going to try and talk tonight about all the positive things that have happened, but we've got a debt that's out of control, a southern border that's out of control, a country that has gone from energy dominance to energy reliance, and we live in an increasingly dangerous world.
You know, Senator, on that, the economy, first off, the administration has been talking about the 517,000 jobs gained in the latest month, the fact that our unemployment rate is back to what it was in the early days of the Nixon administration, and they say that's the wind at their back and our back. Janet Yellen went so far as to say, the Treasury Secretary, we don't have a recession when we have more than 500,000 Americans getting jobs. What do you say?
Well, they got a good report, and we all hope and wish for the best in the economy. But you have to understand, what is going to affect the economy long term are structural changes, policies that you put in place that increase the incentives for investment in our economy, increase the desire of businesses to grow and expand their businesses and create better paying jobs. And if you're raising taxes and doubling down on regulation and making it harder for America to get energy, more expensive for energy, and if you've got this rampant inflation, even though you might be growing, you're still going to be, all those gains are going to be eaten up in the form of inflation. So there are lots of problems, economic problems out there, Neil. I don't expect the president to talk about those, but they're out there. And the reason that he's not doing well with the American people right now is because they don't feel like they're doing well.
Well, then can I follow up on that point, Senator? You know, Kevin McCarthy and the House, as you know, they are working to tie whatever discussions go forward on raising the debt limit to spending and to spending cuts, more to the point. Do you support that, tying the two?
Well, I think this has happened 8 times in history when we've had a debt limit increase where Congress has actually done something about the debt. I think it's an appropriate time to do that. I think
So
there's
you would tie
certainly
it. You think the way they're doing it in the House, you would tie it. Many of your colleagues in the Senate do not agree. I'm talking about your Republican colleagues. You think it's a good strategy?
Well, I think that and I think the White House ought to be open to. I don't think you can take a position like the president did earlier. We're not going to negotiate. I think this Republican majority in the House is coming to the president saying, meet us halfway. Let's do something to address spending and debt in this country. And the debt limit increase is the perfect opportunity to do that. So certainly, I'd support that. I hope they meet with success.
Got it. All right. Senator Thune, always good seeing you. Thank you very, very much.
You too. Thanks, Neil.